Hello students and welcome to the lecture. So students, as we know that we are covering the scheduled and the tribal areas, right? This is the topic on which we have been discussing right now. Within this particular series of the schedule and the tribals, okay, these all are the topics that we have scheduled for the discussion, like the introduction part, like the scheduled areas in India and overview of it, like the criteria for the identification of the scheduled areas, like the constitutional provisions and the governance, like the concerns related to the scheduled areas, like the administration of the scheduled areas, like the scheduled tribes, okay, like the general concerns of the tribal community, like the addressing the challenges, like the significance of the indigenous communities, like the problems that are being faced by the tribal groups, like the conclusion, like the administration of the tribal areas. Okay, so these are the topics that we have scheduled for the discussion. If we talk about the topic that we have covered so far, so basically we have done with the introduction part, we have done with the scheduled areas in India, we have done with the criteria for identification of scheduled areas, we have done with the constitutional provisions and the governance, we have done with the concerns related to the scheduled areas, done with the administration of scheduled areas, done with the scheduled tribes, okay, done with the general concerns of the tribal community. These topics are the topics that we have covered so far. Okay, the topic on which we are discussing right now, this is the addressing the challenges. All right, and the topic we are left with, these are the significance of the indigenous communities, problems that are being faced by the tribal groups, conclusion, and the administration of the tribal areas. Okay, so this is the picture that we have created so far altogether. All right, basically in this lecture we will start from where we have left in the previous one. Okay, so basically in the previous one, when we were discussing the addressing the challenges topic, like we have discussed, or we have started, basically you can say, so far we have done about the general concerns that the tribal communities have. Now in the previous lecture we had started how we could resolve them. The first thing that we discussed was the legal reforms. Okay, like we could strengthening the legal framework that we have in the country, so that we could ensure the secure land tenure and the resource rights for the indigenous communities. All right, because we know that these areas are basically having so many legal loopholes, by using which generally the others taking advantage. Okay, thereafter we have discussed about the effective implementation of the existing laws, like the Forest Right Acts and all. Okay, as per the Forest Right Acts, basically the three rights we have secured for the tribals. And what are these three rights? This is the question for you. Okay, so to answer this question you will have 30 seconds to think and answer, and your time starts now. Just think about it. The 10 seconds have been passed off, last 20s are remaining. Okay, the last 10 seconds. The time is going to be up and the time's up. The correct answer is three rights are there: the individual rights, the community rights, minor forest produce rights. Again, I'm repeating: individual rights, community rights, minor forest produce. Okay, if we talk about the individual rights, okay, then basically that deals with an individual. If he owns the ancestral land in the forest area, then how this land right should be protected, if we talk about the another scenario, if he owns any kind of forest property in that particular area, then how this forest property must be protected. And the third one was the, okay, these two are the individual rights. Second one was the community rights. It means that common land sharing and all, and how the communities must be protected against the arbitrary powers. And the third one was the minor forest produce. It means that the communities are basically allowed and rightful to collect the fallen woods, okay, collect the fruits, collect the leaves and other kinds of things from the forest. Okay, so these are promised under the Forest Rights Act. Okay, and this is generally for the forest dwelling communities. Got it? Thereafter, if you move forward, then the another one is the economic development. Okay, if we talk about it, then basically creating an sustainable economic opportunities. Sustainable economic opportunities, all right, which are not only sustainable for them right now, but also should be sustainable for them for the upcoming generations. Okay, and even these opportunities must be tailored as per the needs and the strengths. Okay, like what is the economic need of the tribal communities, and also what is the economic strength they are having. Okay, by using these two things, how we could make a sustainable economic opportunities for them. And this includes like the promotion of the traditional health, traditional crafts, okay, ecotourism, and the sustainable agriculture. Okay, so all these things basically we have discussed and we have covered in the previous lecture. I hope you have revised the previous lecture in the well enough manner before you have come for this lecture. As many times I have told you, that is for your own benefit. If you are doing this on the regular basis, the thing will be on your favor. If you are not doing this on the regular basis, the thing will be against you. Okay, that's a clear cut thing. Got it? Clear? So now it's a time to let's move. After this, if we talk about addressing these challenges, the first is the conservation efforts. Okay, if we go by things, then basically what we are getting, like the conservation. Conservation is basically means protected something. Okay, so we can say if we talk about the forest area now, okay, so the main danger that persists to the forest, it is not by the individual community, indigenous communities and the tribal communities. Basically, that is mainly from the mainstream people. Why? Because the mainstream is experiencing various development sites, and basically we are spreading ourselves to new and new areas. Okay, and this spreadingness basically comes from encroaching the land that the tribals are having, that is the forest land. All right, and this is not only for the conservation of the schedule and the tribals, or for the protection of the schedule and tribals. Not only this, but this is only, this is also for the environmental conservation. Like the forest and others, they are equally important for the environment also. Okay, so if we will conserve it, we will also conserve the environment. So if we talk about the implementation of this, implementation of the conservation practices, so basically that involve and benefits the indigenous communities. Okay, like you can say, if we really want to protect the flora and fauna and the other kind of biodiversity, okay, within the forest, then basically we must involve the indigenous communities. Why? The question is why? Why should we engage them and why should we involve them? If we talk about it, then we can say basically the one thing that comes out from here is that, and what is that? They are having the main stakes. Okay, if you go to any metropolitan city and if you find someone who is living in the city area and all, and you asking him, let's go and protect the forest and this and that, would he go with you? Clearly I'm speaking, he will not come with you. Why? Because he is not having any stake in the forest. Okay, he is not aware about the importance. He is not dependent on the forest for the livelihood and all. So that's why he is not so much enthusiastic for protecting the forest. But when you go to the tribal people, you ask them that we must protect the forest, this and that, then what will happen? They will be interested. Why? Because they are having their life with the forest. Okay, they are having their life with the forest. They are dependent on the forest for their livelihood and for their survival. So that's why, because their interest in the protection and the conservation of the forest, if we involve them, that will be a beneficial. Okay, and this could include the community managed forest. Okay, community managed forest means, like, suppose you can say, if there is 5 communities living in the forest: community A, community B, community C, community D, and community D. How many communities? 5. A, B, C, D, E. Okay, so suppose one area we have granted to the community A, one area we have granted to the community B, one area to the community C, one area to the community D, and one area to the community E. We have asked them, you are required to protect the forest area, to conserve the forest area that you have been granted. Okay, then what will happen? Basically, these communities will put their efforts. Okay, so first, the ground level work could be ensured. Second, the pressurization could be removed. Like, if the entire thing is only on the one community. Okay, if the entire thing is only on the one community, for example, community A, the things will not be in favor. How? Because the community A is not eligible or not so much capable to protect the entire forest. But if the forest must be divided into the 5 communities for the purpose of conservation, then basically community A, B, C, D, E, these will protect the forest in the well enough manner. All right, that's the thing. After this, the next is the participatory approach, or you can say the participatory approaches. Okay, so what is the significance of this? It means basically the community will participate in the you can say protection and all, and that will ensures the more and more manpower that is basically working for the biodiversity conservation. Okay, so not only we will be able to protect the scheduled and the tribal areas within their you can say the life sphere where they are living, but also we will be ensuring the biodiversity conservation. So this is the benefit. Got it? Now let's move forward. Another thing under the addressing the challenges is the cultural preservation. Okay, so you can say cultural preservation is the must when we talk about the protection required for the scheduled and the tribal areas. And why I'm saying this? Because we want them to indulge with the mainstream, to come into the mainstream, but we do not want them to forget their culture they are having. Why? Because they are having the unique culture, okay, and their unique identity must be maintained in order to uplift them. All right, and we have discussed this, like the you can say the internal migration and the change of the cultural identity concepts. Okay, so what were these concepts? If we talk about them, and if I ask you, you are just required to think the concept of these two things: internal migration and the change of cultural identity. Then how you will do it? And after certain time, I will tell you. So this is the kind of activity for you. This is not the question. All right. And for this, you will have 40 seconds to think and answer. All right. And your time is basically going to be start now. Just think about it. This is not so much hard topic, I will say. All right. 10 seconds have been passed off. Last 30s are remaining. You are just required to recall the concept and just assume that you are required to speak it out or write it down in your examination and all. Then how you will do it. 20 seconds have been passed. Last 20s are remaining. Just think faster. Okay. Last 10 seconds are there. The time is going to be up and the time's up. So if we talk about the internal migration, it means that within the state or within the country, when the tribals migrate from one place to another. Like you can say if someone is from the Chhattisgarh, all right, he is living in the tribal area. Then he could move to the Raipur. Okay. Why? Because Raipur is the capital. He will have the better economic opportunities there. So generally what he will do, he will move there. That is what we call the internal migration. If we talk about change of cultural identity. So I had told you, basically when the tribals come out from the place they are living in. Okay. So generally they usually have a pressure to get indulged with the mainstream or indulge with the environment they are getting. Why? Because as I have given you example, suppose if someone speaks the Maithili language, okay, or any kind of regional Adivasi or Aboriginal language, all right, and then because of the work, in search of the work, he migrates to the New Delhi and all. Okay, so the capital, the New Delhi, is Hindi speaking place. Mostly the people speaks Hindi. Okay, so when the tribal person come to the Delhi, he won't be able to understand the things. Even the people of the Delhi won't be able to understand like what this person is saying. Okay, so communication gap would be there. In order to reduce this communication gap, there are two options only. Either the Delhi start speaking Maithili or that person start speaking Hindi. More feasible is the person start speaking Hindi. Then he is basically giving up his language. His native language was Maithili, but because the current requirements, the current environment in which he is right now, that requires him to speak Hindi, another language, not his mother tongue. So he will start speaking in Hindi. Got my point? That's the thing. Even we have seen that various cultural attributes of the tribals are getting removed when they move out from their places. Like I have given you example, certain tribes contains the tattoos on their bodies. All right, they wear different kind of clothes. They having the different kind of custom activities and all. But once they move out from the places to the another places in search of livelihood and all, so basically they're not so much free to use these cultural identities to make sure or they continue these cultural identities as they could do it when they were there. Why? Because the new environment they are getting is not designed for this kind of things. All right. So basically their culture, their language is lost when they have to migrate and all. Okay. And this is, again, I'm reminding you, this is against our principle of schedule and the tribal conservation. Schedule and the tribal conservation. All right. That's the thing. So we must protect the culture. We must do the cultural preservation. Okay. So if we talk about it, then we can say the supporting initiatives that preserve and promote the cultural heritage of the indigenous communities. All right. These are required. Okay. Why? Because the issue of losing their cultural identity, the issue of losing their language, that could be only addressed by conserving or preserving their culture. Okay. And we should do some kind of initiatives. Okay. So that the cultural heritage of the indigenous communities could be protected and they must not be forced to give up these things just because they are not having the adequate means for their survival and the livelihood. And because they are being forced, not by someone, it is not necessary that some external force is forcing them, but they are forcing themselves just because of the need of the time, just because of the need of the situation. Okay. So this thing should be avoided. Got it? So that's why the cultural preservation is required. That's why the cultural preservation is important. And this involves integrating the indigenous knowledge into the education systems, okay, and promoting the cultural events and the practices. So you can say this thing, if we're talking about the education systems and all, so that thing is not only limited with the tribals, but also limited, or you can say also found in the common things. Okay, how? In the mainstream. So to understand this thing, that we must require to go back to the modern history. And this is the concept, that is a concept of the history. But here I'm connecting it with this thing. Okay. So that in this one lecture, you get connected with the two things and you got the knowledge of two things. So basically, when the Britishers were ruling the India, all right. So Britishers who are trying to educate the Indians. Now you will say that will be a good, if the Britishers were thinking that the Indians must be educated, then this is the good initiative. Yes, this is the good. But not if we look at every aspects. Why the Britishers wanted Indians to get educated? Just because they had different motives to be served of. All right. Like they required the people for the civil services that they had introduced, like they required the people for do very kind of works, okay, and at low pay jobs where the normal European or the normal Britishers not doing it, okay. And the education system they tried to bring in India, that was purely an Western education system, okay. So on the basis of Western education system, the Britishers tried to educate the Indians, and that was supported by many Indians. Many Indian organizations were supporting it, and also many Indian organizations were revolting against it. Why? Because they were claiming that basically this Western education will remove our cultural identity, all right, and other things. Similarly, this thing is also applicable with the tribals. When we talk about the education system, so generally the education system we prefer in India, it is an English medium. Why? Because as a normal Indians, we have, you can say, desire to learn and understand the English. It is an international language also. And that is not a bad thing. I will not say that it's a bad thing. Why? Because even I'm taking a class in English. Okay. So this is the communication medium only. But the education system, when we talk about it in respect of the regional language and the tribal language, then basically this is the thing that is actually eroding the linguistic culture of our country. Why? Because the students, because the children, they are the future of the country. They are the one who going to live in the country in the future, who going to run this country in the future. Okay. So since their childhood, since their age of learning, if they will be trained in English and the other kind of languages, then what will happen when they will grown up? All right. So instead of promoting our native culture, they will promote the Western culture that they had adopted. And that is not a good idea. All right. So that's why the education system that we are providing to the tribal areas, these must include the indigenous language. Okay. Indigenous language and indigenous knowledge. So that the students who are in schools right now, these must get educated in the field of science, in the field of maths, in the field of other kinds of educational streams, but also having the indigenous knowledge that their ancestors had. Okay, so that's how we could preserve their culture and promoting the cultural events and the practices. Okay, the next issue that they are having, that is in healthcare and education. Okay, like as I have told you and like we were discussing, basically if we talk about the scheduled and the tribal areas, so these are generally the remote areas and the cutoff areas from the mainstream. Okay, because of these two things, basically these are the backward areas when we compare it with the other areas. All right, and these areas basically lacking the facilities and all. Okay, so that's why it is not having the proper health care and the education. And even the healthcare that has been provided by the government in some scheduled and tribal areas, those are having various kind of issues. Either the infrastructure issues, maybe the infrastructure is not so much adequate to sustain the different type of patients. Okay, maybe the infrastructure is not that much of adequate to sustain the huge number of people at one time. Okay, maybe the infrastructure is not able to sustain the very critical cases. Okay, and second is the human resource problems. Maybe the hospital is there, maybe the healthcare infrastructure has been installed, but still they do not having a doctor in it. And many things, if you search it on YouTube or Google and you will try to read out the reports, you will get various kind of reports regarding this thing. Okay, like the areas having the infrastructure, having the hospitals, even with the capacity and equipments, but the doctors are not there. Why? Because the tribals are not that much of educated, okay, in the fields because of lacking the education. Secondly, those who are well educated and in the medical stream, these do not want to go to the tribal and the scheduled areas due to the backwardness. All right, because these are generally belong to the metropolitan or tier 2 and tier 3 cities, so they do not having the capability or the comfortability while going to the backward tribal areas. Similar with the education. Education also facing the same kind of issues like the infrastructure issues. Maybe there is no proper building that we call a school. Maybe there is no proper classroom to accommodate the students. Maybe there is no proper educational material that could be, you can say, given to the students and all. Various kind of things are there. All right. Even the human resource factor, if we talk about it, then maybe teachers are not there. All right. This could be also possible. So we can say, in order to resolve these issues, we could improve the access to the quality healthcare and the education in the tribal areas. And this is like building an healthcare infrastructure. Okay. And also training the healthcare professionals who are serving there so that they could handle the cases effectively, and ensuring the education systems are inclusive and culturally sensitive. It means that the education system must be capable to include more and more students, and even must be sensitive to the cultures of the tribal so that their cultural identity could be preserved. All right, that is a thing. So students, basically in this lecture we have finished till here. In the next lecture we will continue from here. Till then, revise the facts and figures we have discussed in this lecture. Be ready for the next lecture. With this note, let's end this lecture, and what we say thank you.